I'm here with the Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay, Alex Walker. Kia ora, Alex, and thanks for joining me.
Kia ora, Andrew. Nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to see you again. It's that time of year. Everyone's busy running around. It's getting hot. Um, but reflecting back on the year, and it was a year with your long-term plan and that, and obviously, biggest rates rise your ratepayers will have seen in forever, really. Um, uh, what do you think of the year? How did it go?
Wow, it's been huge actually, but in a number of ways. Huge rate increases just being one part of that. Look, I feel like coming into the end of this year, that in council, there is a skerrick of normality returning away from the scramble of that early response recovery from the cyclone, where that really put everything into disarray. And so, what we've got now coming into the end of this year is that Central Hawke's Bay District Council has moved into a new space that was dictated in our long-term plan. We've undertaken some pretty big changes in our land transport team to be delivering better value and better outcomes on our roads. Outside of just the recovery, we've also landed funding packages on roading recovery. Those are all out for tender now to get underway in the new year. And all of our water renewals are now back up on track. And so I'm feeling like there's a little less trauma and a bit more proactive and really great work starting to transpire from our teams and a bit of normality.
That's interesting you say that because I mean the spectre of the cyclone still looms large, and also in how you get away from being so vulnerable to weather events, surely.
Yeah, absolutely, but we're now in a place that we can be a bit more proactive in how we solve some of those things. So our drinking water treatment plant in Waipawa, for instance, on Takakino Road, that was heavily impacted from the cyclone. It supplies Waipawa's drinking water and Otani's drinking water, and actually earmarked for the future to be a backup through to Waipukaro as well. Um, we now have funding confirmed from the government to support us in actually a relocation of that drinking water plant, which is going to be underway in the new year as well. And so we've actually got the funding, the certainty, the plans, the contracts are out, the work starts to happen. And so nothing breeds a bit of confidence like action. And once you take one action and get things going, then a lot more does happen after that.
Where will it be relocated to?
It's going to be lifted not too far. It's going to be moved inland, so to speak, away from the river slightly,
Yeah.
and lifted up onto a tier that's higher than the current river plane. It's a resilience piece of work to create the best site for the future. A really great outcome for us.
And what happens in the meantime? Do you just keep going with the existing one and then just transfer it over?
So yes, but we have done a couple of things. We have reinstated the stop bank that was sitting on private land next door that was part of the protection. And also as we have rebuilt that plant, even just the simple things of putting the electronic equipment, instead of being at hands or eyes reach on the wall, it's actually higher up on the wall. And so it's a bit higher up away from the flood zone levels. So even just practical things like that that give us a bit more resilience, even just in the short term.
Okay, so you're quite confident as things go, because I mean, as you say, the roading and that is quite a bit you've got. I notice, I see from NZTA that you've got a big stretch of State Highway 2 coming into Waipawa that's been worked on. There's a lot going on, eh?
Yeah, there is. Well, look, let's be honest on our roads. We both on the state highways and the local network, we're probably a good 5 to 10 years behind, to be quite honest. That piece of rehab to happen on the main street in Waipawa over this coming summer, that's been on the books with Waka Kotahi for probably 5 years now. We've known that that's coming, and it's been put off and it's been put off. They started a bit, then they went away, and then they've come back. So actually, what we need is a really focused, highly productive piece of work that happens there over the next 3 months to get that done and get it done well. It's a notorious stretch of road that has been
Yeah.
underinvested. And so that's what we're looking forward to. It will be disruptive, But the reality is we need better roads, and we're just going to have to put up with that in the short term to get to that outcome. And to be honest, I think in our roading network on our recovery sites, there's a little bit of the same patience required. We know we've got to get this stuff done. We need to get in as quickly as we can. It means we've got to be a bit patient with roadworks and the disruptions in the short term.
And how the bridges going? Because you had a number of bridges that were taken out by Cyclone Gabrielle and that and affected and that. So how those got the rebuilds going there?
Yeah. So we've got a number that have been reinstated. We have got Douglas Cutting and up into Wakarara, which is now back up and running at full weight capacity. But there is another important one that we call Fletcher's Crossing that connects to the other side of the Makaroro River, which is still having some work done. That's not yet completed, so there's more work to do there. But look, we had government funding confirmed in October for this current financial year in terms of funding support. It was not as much as we would have liked to get through our whole program. So we ended up at an 89% funding assistance rate where we had been planning for 95. It's meant that we've had to reshape our program to be very clear about what the priorities are. And there are some bridges and locations that we're probably not going to get to in the short to medium term. There's one just outside of Otani, there's one just outside of Takapo that are actually not going to be part of the funding envelope for at least the short term. So some of those sites we've had to refocus on getting the most important things done.
Now, we've spoken lots about the fact that you don't have a big ratepayer base, but yet you don't want to keep pushing up. And I mean, I think your rates for this year were 20.9, was that correct? And
yes.
And what is the plan for next year? What is
year two of our long-term plan was sitting at 14% rates increase. But actually the heavier weight of that sits on our targeted ratepayers. Year two was at 18% for those that are in town and connected to water services. And so we're working through at the moment about how the work that's been done is rephased. Interest rates have come down. So there's a whole lot of moving parts in our budgets that will see that shift. We're actually workshopping some of that later this week. And a pretty clear view that we need to be way smarter with how things are being delivered. And we're seeing that in our business, which is great. So we'll be workshopping later this week about where that plan looks like. But to be honest, the headwinds for how local government deals with investing in infrastructure, unless there is a major system change, this is going to confound not just small councils, but all councils for quite some time. So things like the local water done well work actually becomes fundamental to how we shift this into a more sustainable place for the whole country, not just us.
I'm going to ask you more about that, but just in terms of, because I mean, 14 odd percent does seem a little bit optimistic as we talking now. Is there a chance it could blow out to 20% again, or what are you doing to prevent that?
No, the direction of travel on that is that number's going to come down because interest rates have come down. Some of our inflationary the inflation in the construction sector has come down. There's a bit more competition in the sector. We are looking really carefully about where those activities come from and about how we get cleverer about the phasing of some of our projects as well. And look, the other thing that's happened for us this year is we set the budget to start on 1st of July. I just mentioned about Waka Kotahi and their funding. They didn't confirm until October. So there were things in our budget we thought we'd be doing in August, September and October, actually not going to happen until next year. So that just pushes some impacts on rates further out. So all of those things are advantages.
So local water's done well. You have been sort of quite a strong voice in sort of wanting this to be fair and equitable for everyone. Where are things at, and are you happy with things?
Yeah, so we've re-picked up the piece of work we had done. We started 5 years ago. That feels like just yesterday, but actually time marches on. We've picked that up again as a region, and for the last few months have been reworking those numbers, looking at actually where investment needs to look now so that we can retest what our new delivery looks like for Three Waters. The new government, the coalition government, have been fairly clear about how they've set their policy position, which is they've set a system which is for local government to choose the right way to make delivery of their water infrastructure sustainable. But they're also very clear that their expectation is that we're working together and that is going to provide the most sustainable way forward. A lot of our numbers show that. We know that from 5 years ago. Actually, it's a positive way to look at it. So the whole region is looking at those numbers, and actually in February we'll be seeing where that business case has landed. We'll be taking a decision and doing a consultation right across the region about what options we've got and how we might move forward. At the centre of that is, how do the 4 territorial authorities come together to get the best impact for the region that we can?
Because that's the key. You have to work together.
Absolutely. And if you also extend the thinking, not just from local water done well, but actually to some of the other things that government are signalling, and not even signalling, but actually saying out loud. They want to talk about regional deals. They're not interested in having a huge number of individual bespoke deals right across the country. They want to talk to the 16, 17 provinces of the country. They want to talk to Hawke's Bay as a group about what does a joined up view of investment and the future look like for the region. So they're being very clear that that joined up way of working is how we get the best out of them too, not just the best out of us.
Because you're in a situation where you're all trying to get more for less money, all the councils. We have the situation with Hawke's Bay Tourism. Legacy has it that it became the baby of the regional council. Regional council has just signaled that after come June next year, they're going to stop funding for the Hawke's Bay Tourism. Their indication and suggestion is that maybe the other councils should pick it up and play their part. What's your view on that?
So when they chose their options going into the long-term plan earlier in the year, we supported them to create a process where they continue to fund for this current financial year, to give some time for further work on the funding model to be done, and that includes with us as the TAs. So Hawke's Bay Tourism has provided us with information about what they've done. So they have doubled their membership across the industry association that owns Hawke's Bay Tourism. They have done a lot of work around conversations around industry about what other funding pathways there might be, also with government. And also there is a proposal amongst the rest of the territorial authorities that there is a minimum viable product for Hawke's Bay Tourism to continue promoting brand Hawke's Bay, which is about $1 million, and how would we spread that across the territorial authorities? Definitely Hastings, Napier and Central Hawke's Bay have got that in our draft budgets going forward. We were hoping that Regional Council was going to be in that mix too, to make sure that it was all of us together. I think there's still a bit to play out over the coming few weeks and months as we get to actually setting the budgets. My view is we're stronger together, and I think it would be irresponsible to let this promotion of brand Hawke's Bay go. We know how hard it is to build up those regional structures to a place of being high performing, and actually I think we've got a responsibility to continue to support that. It's too much to lose if we let it go.
And you believe that Regional Council is part of that plan?
Absolutely, we all have to have a role. And so the thing with any sort of economic development, tourism development, is we all deliver parts of our product offering are directly related to this. So whether it's how a territorial authority looks after their CBD where the cafes are operating, or the events we might have in our parks, or the role that Regional Council has on cycleways, or as the majority owner of Napier Port with the cruise ships coming in, we all build and do things to do with that economic activity, but actually it's the cohesive bit that pulls the brand, the message and the direction together that's really important. And we can't go back to the Hawke's Bay of 10 years ago, which was divided and did not have unified messaging about what it meant to be Hawke's Bay.
Yeah. I notice you're not really talking too much about Wairoa. Why is that?
So Wairoa definitely part of the mix. Conversations maybe not as developed, but they're part of all of these conversations as well.
Now, what's your views on the Tuki water scheme and the fact that it's now a priority project, if you like? Are you excited about that, or is it not going to impact you too much?
Look, I'm really thrilled. So, if we look at both Central Hawke's Bay and the wider Hawke's Bay region, our competitive advantage is actually about our soil, our sunshine, and our water. And that's whether you're in Hiratonga or Wairoa or here in Tamatea, Central Hawke's Bay. And we have a responsibility to look at this really carefully. Water security has been a priority for the whole region for a number of years now. Our regional council did their package of work with the Provincial Growth Fund about the regional water assessment, looking at how much water actually was in our system, how much we needed. They've done work on managed aquifer recharge as well. So this is a step where we can actually, in 2024 and 2025 terms, look at what storage could look like as part of the water security picture for Tuki catchment and for the wider region. And when I think about the sunshine, the heat, and the wind that's been outside here for the last few weeks, you know, we have to be looking at this. It's really important to me and to our whole Central Hawke's Bay community.
But the thing is, you don't want a burden for your and the regional council as well. That's the issue, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we need to have a better handle of how we involve central government, local government, and who pays across public and private split. And if I think about some of what fell over in the business case when it was Ruataniwha a few years ago, a lot of that came down to, well, actually, what was the role of the regional council, and was it favouring some over others, and who paid for what, and actually some of that mix was a bit wrong in that business model.
Yeah.
So we've got a chance to kind of step back and look at a better view of what that business model could look like. And it's not just about commercial outcomes and about irrigation. This is actually about flipping the priorities over to make sure our rivers are looked after first, and our people are looked after second, and then we look to commercial interests and how do we build that business model. And look, this is a real shot of confidence for our community here.
So what are the two things you're most happy with in the last year that you've done?
So actually, that's probably one of them, to be honest. That's a really big step forward for us. But actually, it's actually been about the work that Central Hawke's Bay District Council has done on roading network. And there's been a really visible step shift in the work that we've been doing and the work that's visible in the community. We haven't fixed all of our recovery problems yet, for sure. But there has been a complete change in operating model, which has been really visible here in Central Hawke's Bay. To most people who visit even maybe not have noticed it, but our community that lives here have, and I'm really proud of that. And I'm also really proud of the fact that we come through to the end of this year in a space where the council business is in a far more recovered space than it was, and able to deliver those things, where for a period of a couple of years post the cyclone, that was very difficult. So we're in a good place now to tackle the future, and 2025 has got lots of great things ahead for us.
What are your two or three priorities for next year?
Water and housing. It actually doesn't change much from year to year, but the context changes a little bit. So water, our water security conversations are really important here and for the whole region, and our local water done well consultation and decision making about how we utilise and pay for and run and manage and invest in our water assets moving forward. That's key for how we keep things affordable, but also how we look to what growth looks like in the region. And the second thing is about housing. So in Hastings and Napier, future development strategy has been marking out what future housing and industrial growth looks like. Actually, there's really big opportunities if we lift our eyes to Waipukaro in particular, where there is capacity for industrial growth and thousands, literally thousands of sections that have been subdivided over the last few years. And the challenge is how we unlock that to contribute to the wider regional economic picture. And there's oodles of opportunities for us in that, both for how we build locally, how we keep our retiring population here in Central Hawke's Bay, but also how we attract talent and hardworking families to be part of our economy.
Are you suggesting that you want to be part of the Napier Hastings FDS?
Not necessarily. The FDS is a piece of it's a regulatory piece of policy that's come from national policy statement from central government. So they need to work through what they need to work through in there. But in terms of the bigger spatial picture, the regional spatial plan about what success looks like for the region, we have to make sure that the whole region looks to the whole gambit of where soil, water, housing and workforce can and should be in the future. And Central Hawke's Bay has a significant role to play in that. And we're going to mark that out really clearly.
Because one of the issues of contention with the FDS is some areas that are maybe a bit flood prone and that. So are there any areas in your area that you've sort of identified that we need to maybe steer away from that?
Not necessarily in the risk space, but in terms of the highly available to develop, and we're working really hard on. We've got 50 hectares in the centre of the Waipukaro township that was the old hospital site and the hospital farm and a suite of other properties around that is currently undeveloped. The structure plans for that say that we could accommodate as many as 950 new households in a urban zoned, close to town, great amenity spot. And so how we bring together the investment to make that happen is a massive opportunity.
Yeah. And just going forward in terms of, because you're also involved with local government New Zealand and that, just in terms of changes within there and advocating for smaller councils and rural councils, how's that going?
Oh, look, it's really challenging. We've had, in the last 6 or 7 years, we've had 3 very different views of central government leadership that have had a huge impact on local government. And it has been quite a big swing, and it puts a lot of unfunded mandate, both in terms of stress and having to do work, but also in terms of costs that then turn up on our ratepayers. It is challenging to have a united message of what local government needs to the central government platform because of how big change has been. But look, there are some common things that come along, and just like our private sector actually is calling out for certainty, local government is calling out for certainty too. We cannot survive continuously moving our central government policy that flip-flops every 3 years. We just can't survive that. It's just not financially feasible.
Is the coalition government more difficult to work with than the previous government?
I don't know that you could say that that's more difficult. It's just different. They're very clear on what they want to achieve, which is great. And that clarity of thinking is really helpful. And they want to create joined up plans that give some longevity and some certainty for that. We're pushing really hard that is as bipartisan as it can be at a national level. But we continue to see that none of these things actually fix the problem of a funding and financing model for local government, which is broken. It's like we're afraid to have the conversation of should it be property tax or income tax that pays for local infrastructure, and how do we get that balance right? And at the moment, the property tax tap through local government is turned on full bore, is what it feels like. But we're not seeing that balance of understanding centrally about what more role they could play without just putting more costs on us.
So you suggesting there should be an increase in income tax that should go filter down to the regions. Is that what you're saying?
We need to look at other models that bring money into looking after local infrastructure.
But would that be one of them?
Local government owns 25% of infrastructure in the country, but in terms of public purse of income, we're sitting at about 8 or 9%. So that doesn't make any sense. And if our ratepayers are saying that at a property tax level, it's getting too much for them to pay every quarter to pay their rates, well, what is the balance that comes from the other side of that, from a central government participation in that? Because we're not able to operate on all of it. So whether it is portion of income tax or other income mechanisms that can be used, bed taxes, other ways of creating income, even a slice of the visitor levy, which the government is putting in place. How is that supporting local infrastructure to support visitors? We don't seem to be able to break into that just at the moment.
So who's going to lead this conversation? How are you going to get this conversation going?
So Local Government New Zealand actually just last week launched a toolkit of 25 different funding mechanisms and financing tools that would make a difference in local government. About a third of those we have some interest from central government to talk to us about. About a third, and they are keen to do, about a third they're interested in but not quite sure, and the other third are things that this government's not interested in, but they would be good for local government going forward. So there are some high-level national conversations about those funding and financing tools. It's a very tight piece of work, 25 very clearly described funding and financing tools.
Now, the question I always ask you, going forward into the elections, you still got it in you? You still want to go ahead?
Oh, absolutely. Got lots still to give and lots still to do, actually. And when I think about those priorities around water and housing, there is much left to do. The other thing for me is that the changing representative mix and how we run the governance of our council is really important to me as well. We have a decision from our council that to introduce Māori wards going into the next election, and there will be a referendum. I'm very clear that that is something that would be great for Central Hawke's Bay community and for Central Hawke's Bay District Council, and want to be part of leading that representation change into our council. So still got plenty to do.
Because on the Māori wards, your council was a bit divided on that. So are you confident that with the referendum you're going to have to hold, that actually the public will support it?
Confident that we can have a conversation about what it means locally, and we have to back ourselves, and I can see that it will be valuable for us in Central Hawke's Bay to have that partnership approach, and actually the choice of our mana whenua to exert their tēnā rangatiratanga, to choose that actually if they're on the Māori roll that they vote for those that represent them as a Māori ward onto council. It is very logical to me, and there is a lot of value to be had in Central Hawke's Bay if we embrace that and use that as a way that we can carve a future.
Mayor Alex Walker, thank you so much for your time. Have a good break over the holidays, and we'll speak to you again in the new year.
Thanks, Andrew.